Mr. Parker, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to have you on, and I'd love for you to introduce yourself and explain how you help people buy businesses and how you got into all this.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me, but you got to call me Richard. So if not, you're gonna make because if not, you make me sound like an old fart. So, which I am, but I don't want to admit it. Um, so I've been buying businesses for it's 34 years now, buying and selling my own businesses. I've acquired 14 of them, which includes one co-investment. I got into it really from a standpoint almost of desperation. I was working for a company, and I was young. I was 29 years old and I had made a horrible mistake in the stock market. I bought stock on margin, not knowing what the hell I was doing, and I blew $60,000. At that point in time, my life savings were 90,000, and realized, and my first child was on the way, and realized that the only way I was going to get into this out of this mess was I had to figure out how I'm going to make more money. And I was where I was working, I was already overpaid, so getting another job, that would pay me more was not going to happen. And so looked at thinking about what I can do to put myself in a position, realized that I've got to go into my own business where I didn't have any ceiling on my income. And I ended up first starting something very small and short within a few months realized that as far as growth opportunities, it was going to be much better for me to acquire some companies to tuck in and grow my business versus organic growth. And so I bought my first company very shortly thereafter, with the remaining $30,000 that I had effectively. And it's a long time away. And here we are, again, 30 plus years later and 14 businesses later. And the business sizes have varied from, $50,000 to over $200 million. And along the way, I started assisting buyers, helping individuals acquire businesses, and also do some sell side investment banking, which I'm happy to talk about. And that's how I arrived here today.
So many things to talk about. I am so excited. And so, one thing that you touched on, which I thought was interesting, was the difference between organic and kind of you buying businesses. And so, I'll speak for myself at least. I feel like when I think entrepreneurship, I mean, to go out there, build a business from the ground up. And now, especially in like the media and whatnot, I'm seeing more of a trend of people actually talking about buying businesses rather than starting it from the ground up. So, what are some key differences that you see, in what you would recommend? Should someone who's looking to be an entrepreneur and whatnot actually go out there and buy a business, or should they be grow it organically?
Well, it's a great question, and it's just surprising to me how long it's taken people for this concept to catch on as far as acquiring businesses. And I think for many years, and certainly the access to information has been helpful in that regard. And for many years, I think individuals, if you will, thought of business acquisitions either being only for larger companies to be able to do or for wealthy individuals to do. And nothing could be further from the truth because it's certainly very doable. I mean, there are very significant differences between startups and buying existing businesses. I mean, the failure rate of startups is enormous. I mean, I've started some businesses. I think it's a great idea for people to do or attempt because it's usually great learning, and some are successful, but just a tiny amount. And the difference is with a startup, unless you're incredibly well capitalized, everything is just it's just a plan. It's just a hope and a dream. Nothing is proven. It's all blue sky. You can convince yourself of anything. You have nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so on the one hand, you say, well, we could build it the way we like it, but that's great. But you really still have nothing. Versus an existing business where you have revenues, you have profits, you have employees, you have customers, you have suppliers, you have processes, procedures, systems, and you can hit the ground running. And you've already passed that startup phase. Now, I can make the argument all day long for the advantages of buying a business, but people also have to be realistic because what I mentioned earlier about the access to information has made this more, has risen the profile of buying existing businesses. People also have to be realistic because there's a lot of misinformation around about this concept of being able to buy businesses cash flowing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and buying them for zero down and closing deals in 30 days. I mean, that's just complete nonsense. That's not the real world. So that's the
Yeah.
bad part of the internet. So, and when you do it in a practical, prudent, and realistic way, it certainly is. You get off to a running start. When you buy an existing business, you get the keys on Monday. You can take a paycheck on Friday. With a startup, you just keep funding what you're hoping is going to turn into a business at some point.
Mhm. Yeah. And in terms of misinformation, I'd love to know, like, what are some common myths? And I hear this all the time, but what are some common myths that you think that should be exposed in terms of buying businesses and helping people buy businesses?
The first thing is clearly is this concept of these individuals that are selling, these programs for thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. I know one group that does it at six figures that tries to convince you that you can buy, that we talked about earlier, you can buy these businesses, these glorious businesses for zero down and get into them with absolutely no money out of pocket. That's one thing that it's just not reality. The second thing is this concept about a lot of these sales pitches, real true sales pitches that you're about for people to buy distressed businesses and how you could really get into them for inexpensively. Well, there's a reason why they're distressed. I mean, so you're buying a crap business to start with. Now, you may possibly make it better, but you are getting garbage. I mean, that's what you're buying. You're buying a pile of crap. And so when there's a distressed business, you also have to be in a position that you have to capitalize that business. You buy an existing business, as we said, you get keys on Monday, you take a paycheck on Friday. You buy a distressed business, you get the keys on Monday. On Friday, you have to write a check to the business to fund the business and grow it. And unless you have a wealth of experience in that particular type of business, I mean, what could lead someone to believe that they are going to be more successful than someone who is running that business? If you have no experience, you're just going to have a bigger headache. So that's, the myth number two. The third one is really related to these absentee run businesses. And it's strictly not realistic. I mean, running a business absentee, in my opinion, usually equals absentee profits. And no business is absentee unless you have a logical blueprint to eventually exit the business yourself, to extract yourself from the business. But you buy a business, even the simplest business that you could possibly imagine, I want to reduce it to the absurd, a dry cleaner. And you say you're going to run it absentee. Well, if you have no experience in that industry and you have a manager in place, and you have a full-time job and this business is running absentee. Well, what happens if the manager quits or employees quit or there's an issue with the business? You don't even have any experience to know who to hire to replace them. And then you're suddenly going to have to fill that role. So this concept of absentee run businesses, yes, it's wonderful, but first you have to immerse yourself in the business. You have to learn to get the guts of the business in your belly. And then you can plan for eventually extracting yourself from the day-to-day operations. But you can't do that at the beginning. I mean, those are clearly three myths that, and people go down the wrong road and way off the reservation thinking that these things are possible.
Yeah. Yeah, but it seems like a common sales trait where it's, people are being pitched this dream of I'm going to buy this business and then on Friday I'm going to become a millionaire after I bought it. And it probably takes time. And so, how long do you think after buying a business do you think that dream would come true if they're actually taking in profit, taking home the paychecks and stuff like that? Like how quick is the turnaround? And how quick is this process in general of actually going out there and buying a business? Because I'm sure it's not a 30-second process where you go, Zelle someone some money or Venmo some money. So how long does that usually take to actually go out there and acquire the business and then start operating it?
Okay, so there's two questions. The first one related to how quickly it's profitable. Well, if you buy an existing business and a profitable business, you'll take a paycheck the first week because that's
Okay.
the idea. The business already has existing cash flow, and that's measured into. And so that's the beauty of buying an existing business. And when I state that you get the keys on Monday and you can take a paycheck on Friday, that's the goal. I mean, that's why
Mhm.
you buy an existing business, potentially even pay a premium at times, but you buy a robust operating business. And so generating profits, you want to buy a profitable business. You want to buy a business that's not profitable. You want to buy the one that's
Mhm.
profitable, that you're the right person to own, and then you can grow. Um, so that's the first part. As far as the total timing is concerned, it varies a little bit related to deal size, but in general, in the lower market, businesses selling for under a few $1 million, that typically from the time they go to market until they're sold is usually around, in the past has been about 9 months. Now it's a little longer. It's usually 15. That's the time from when a business goes to market till it's sold. But that's looking at through the lens of a seller. From the lens of a buyer, anybody who does this right, you should be able to, if you decide today that you want to buy a business, more importantly, if you decide that you need to buy a business for a whole host of reasons we can talk about, we teach our clients how to do this in 6 months. So we have a formula. It's called 44411, which it should take you, the search should take you 4 months. You should have narrowed down to four categories, and you have to make at least four offers. And then, so in 4 months, you should be able to do that. And then 1 month to negotiate, 1 month for due diligence. Sometimes the last two may take a little longer depending on the financing, but this whole process, 82% of our clients buy a business in 6 months. And that's realistic. I read about people who, who are looking for 2 years or whatever. That's just because they don't have a blueprint or a roadmap to follow. I mean, other than that, it's 6 month process should do it if you're searching and looking full time.
Hmm. Okay. And what are some, I know you said you bought yourself 14 businesses. And so what are some common businesses that people tend to acquire? I'm sure it's different depending on the market, but at least in your experience that you've seen people buy.
What types they
So
tend
some,
to buy?
so what, yeah, what types of businesses do people tend to buy?
Well, on the lower end, people are generally buying more service related businesses. I mean, there's so many. If you spend any time looking at the business for sale market, I mean, there's businesses that exist you wouldn't even believe that they exist.
Mhm.
So it's a wide swath of them where I think people get where they make where there's a misunderstanding is you do not need to buy a business in an industry which you have familiarity. People confuse experience with expertise. Experience is, industries that you worked in. Expertise is what you've done, what your greatest skill set, where you have talent that you can apply to the business. But as far as the business is concerned, I mean, really service businesses in the lower end that are not capital intensive, meaning that they're not asset heavy where you have to continually fund the business or acquiring new equipment. The service businesses in the lower market and a lot of home service businesses, commercial services, I mean, are really, really popular. Manufacturing less so, just again, that's on the lower market only because of cost of continually funding the business and acquiring, and acquiring new assets.
Mhm. And over your career, has there been any sort of huge change in the practice that people buy businesses? And have you seen any sort of trends evolve here and there in how the practice is done?
Yeah, I mean, by and large, the process has remained the same for decades. I always
Mhm.
tell people if I were to die and come back in 20 years, I'd probably have to rewrite 20 pages of our 500-page program because, for the most part, the process of figuring out what type of business is right for you, the search, the negotiation, the evaluation, the due diligence, the financing, for the most part, is really the same. What has changed quite a bit is the access to businesses because of the internet has a lot of publicly listed businesses for sale. So that's been very helpful to people. And, many years ago, businesses were listed in the newspaper on Sunday in the business opportunity section. And
Mhm.
so the search was much more difficult. It's also opened up to many more people, which I think is probably the single biggest change is that people are finally realizing that this is doable. And there are, especially in America, I mean, I deal with clients in 80 countries at this point, but especially in America, it's from a financing perspective with some of the programs like SBA or what we've been teaching and preaching for decades, which is seller financing. Gets the deals done. So I think if the search process itself has been expanded because of the internet, people's knowledge, the acquisition of knowledge can be more readily available. Some people do it the wrong way when they acquire bad information, but the information is more readily available, and the financing options that are available to people, whether it be traditional SBA type loans or individuals that are looking to potentially invest in businesses, become more prevalent.
Yeah. That term of seller financing, I hear that get thrown around a lot, especially in the media. And so for myself and someone else who wouldn't be familiar with that term, what is that strategy and what is seller financing?
So seller financing, in effect, takes the position of the bank. You buy a business at $1 million and you put down $300,000. The seller you're paying off the seller for the balance of the $700,000. You're giving them a
Mhm.
personal guarantee, but you're not pledging personal assets like you do with a traditional lender. And so the seller acts as the bank. And it's important to understand that in the lower market now, this is because of interest rates, has really extended into some billion-dollar deals. Is the seller sometimes the only way to get the deal to the finish line is the seller has to finance it because banks don't lend money to individuals like you, for example, or most of the people probably listening who have no track record buying businesses. You would think when you watch some of their commercials that the vault is open, they're lending you money. They don't lend money. The SBA has some programs. The individual and the business has to qualify. It's much more rigid process. It's not the majority of deals. And so the only options that are available, either you can pay all cash for business, which most people can't, or the seller participates in the financing and they take the role of the bank in essence. And they really are, that's the only way to get deals done and closed. And furthermore, from a buyer's perspective, it's really the most valuable way to validate what the seller has represented about their business. They've got skin in the game, or cojones on the line, whatever way you want to put it. So and so for them to finance the transaction really backs up what they've represented about the business. And typically the terms, well, the terms can vary, the length, the interest rates. You will usually get a more favorable rate. And the other part of it is you could negotiate. In other words, you buy the business, you have a seller note and say, I want to pay interest only for the first 6 months or a year. Or there's, you have these, they have a claim, the collateral is the assets of the business. There's not going to be any interest or principal payments for the first 6 months, so I can have the benefit of the additional operating capital. And so it's very, very favorable. And I've never bought a business without it. 91% of our clients obtain a degree of seller financing in their transactions. And I think for the way of getting them to the finish line, being able to negotiate and having leverage with the seller, it really is a wonderful way to go, especially in the lower market.
Yeah. 100%. And another person I listened to, kind of touching on that, on the internet, I don't know if you know this woman named Cody Sanchez, but she always
Yeah.
talks about how this is a great time in history out of any other time to actually buy businesses because a lot of people of the older generation are actually selling their businesses. They want to retire, and I think I forget the term she exactly uses, but would you also agree that this in particular is a great time to be buying businesses given the nature of the market?
I think she probably refers to it as the silver tsunami, which is what the people that are becoming the baby boomers becoming of retirement age.
Yeah.
I will say I believe it's always a good time to be buying businesses. However, with I definitely more businesses are coming to market as a result of it. I have not seen, nor has the market seen, this flood of businesses that have been projected. It's still waiting to come in significant volume. There is some validity to that argument. It What'll happen is, however, is good businesses will always sell regardless of the market. There will be more of them, so it will provide more options to more buyers. I believe that it's an excellent time to be buying businesses more from an economic standpoint of what's currently happening as far as interest rates going up, the lack of banks participation, and so this really becomes, excuse me, favorable to buyers. And so I think it's a wonderful. I always think it's a great time to buy businesses, but I think it's especially more so now. Part of that of what she talks about, yes, but I don't think that's the biggest part of it. I think it more from a standpoint of the negotiation standpoint and how the buyer sits right now. And there's a lot of buyers that are concerned about recession or certain more macroeconomics, and so they fall off and they sit by the side. So there's less buyers, means becomes more of a buyer's market. Sellers don't have the same buyer pool. So I understand what she's saying. I don't necessarily agree with that specific point as the sole reason. There's other ones that I think in the real world are more significant. But yes, it really is a good time.
Yeah. And how do you actually identify a great business to buy and the price to which to buy it at? So how do you actually go about searching for it? And then once you're looking at it, actually deciding this is a great business and we should acquire this?
Well, first of all, I believe in people buying good businesses, not great ones, because it gives you some good runway to grow the business. You buy a great business, you're sort of at the pinnacle, and there's most of the time there's only one way to go at that point, and you want to buy it when it's the middle. Like I talk about these 3 Gs on the hill. A business starts off, it's garbage, in the middle it's good, and at the top of the summit it's great. And that's the life cycle of a business. And then it falls off. You want to buy a good business in the middle, pay a fair price for it, and then you have all this trajectory ahead of you to build it into a great business. The single most important thing that people need to understand is they've got to get very aligned with what type of business is right for them. You have to apply your greatest skill set, because the right business, it may be a good business, but if you're the wrong person to operate it, you're going to go bankrupt.
Mhm.
Similarly, if it's a good business run by the wrong person, you're the right person, you're going to have tremendous growth. And so I first identifying your greatest skill set, and you have to match that. The mantra that we've been teaching and preaching for years is whatever it is that you do best has to be the single most important driving factor of the revenue and profits of any business you consider purchasing. Now, with that said, how do you go about doing this, right? So the best way is you pick out 4 categories of businesses that you think you may be interested, whatever they may be. It could be home healthcare, it could be lawn service, it could be commercial landscaping, or it could be pest control or manufacturing. 4 categories. You go online. The beauty of the online business for sale websites is you pick out 5 sellers in each category. Regardless of what the numbers look like, you're using this as a laboratory. You pick out 4 categories, 5 sellers in each, and then you can go and you meet face to face with 20 sellers or individuals that are actively marketing their business. And you could really drill down to what drives the business. What do you do every day? How do you grow this business? What are the challenges that you face? Similarly, if you believe in those 4 categories to begin with, you can go speak to other business owners whose businesses are not for sale and understand from them what drives your business. What do you do every day? And then you want to narrow it down and make sure that your greatest skill set, where it be sales and marketing, logistics, operations, accounting, putting a plan together, whatever that greatest skill set is, to be able to match it with that type of business. I mean, that's the goal. And once you have that nailed, then finding and buying it is really easy, because then you could have a really focused search. So I hope it makes sense. You understand,
Yeah.
you're narrowing it down, and the alignment of your best skill set has to be in tune and perfect harmony with what that business needs to drive the sales and profits of that business.
Yeah, that actually answered my next question, which was what skills you think people need to have to go buy businesses. But it's kind of nice to hear that you're actually should be aligning your skill set with the business you're buying. And so that question is kind of subjected to the business you're buying. And so,
Correct.
which is super interesting. And so for your company that you help people buy businesses, can you kind of run me through the program or the process that you use to help people? And obviously, how should people, if they want to use your program, actually get out there and find you and get involved?
Okay. So the foundation of our program is modular, meaning we lay out 23 steps in the business buying process, from the first thing being considerations you should have. For example, if you have a partner or a spouse, considerations about making sure that they're all on board with that, to what life looks like with owning a business. So the real serious considerations to make. So that from step one straight through to close. What do you do after you buy the business, post closing priorities? And so in between all of that, all of the sort of totality of 23 steps laid out, from considerations to make, how to identify the right business, what constitutes a good business, where to look, how to reach out directly to sellers, how to value a business. We have a plug and play module that we've developed over many years and 1,017 successful transactions. You plug in the number, it pumps out a valuation. And so we lay it out. That's how we lay out our program and the steps of the buying process. Similarly, we allow people to email me if they have any questions. So we provide ongoing support for people that are going through the process, because you're going to have questions. I mean, you want hand holding. And we did a lot of research way back when as to what people really needed. They need the right knowledge, and they need advice. I never went into this business thinking it was going to be a business. I wrote this to memorialize all of my deals and to hopefully help one person. I never thought it was going to turn into a business. I've never been driven by the money. If I never sell another program, my life doesn't get affected one bit. That it turned into a business is unbelievable to me. And we've helped, sold over 100,000 of these. And help tens of thousands of people acquire businesses. So my world, my universe, and at this stage of my life, I'm just looking to really, I feel an obligation, because there's so much bad information, but really wanting to provide valuable information to people and to help them. And so we have this, it's really a knowledge library. And if they go to richardparker.com, easy to remember, richardparker.com, we have hundreds of free articles. We have free reports. And then we, of course, have our course, takes people through the process. We don't upsell people. We don't sell a course and then hammer them to join mastermind groups or roundtable groups or and consulting for thousands of dollars. We don't do that. We sell the whole program for under $200, believe it or not, because we just want to make it incredibly affordable for people, and especially for people who really aren't sure what they want to do, to learn about this and then decide if and how they want to do it. So it takes you through the whole process, and all of the tools that people need are going to easily find on that website.
Yeah. I definitely have learned a lot. And so is there any sort of any bits of advice kind of overall that you would give for anyone looking to get into actually buying a business and doing all the things we talked about today?
Well, I think people should really understand that, first of all, that this is doable. It is very doable if when you arm yourself with the right information and surround yourself with the right um, mentors or advisors. First of all, it's doable. It's not just for rich people or big companies. The second thing is, for anybody who has an ounce of interest in entrepreneurship, whatever that may look like in their mind at this point, starting a business, buying a business, what have you. I think you really owe it to yourself to find out what's involved. You may not do it. I mean, anybody can, not everybody will, but I think you owe it to yourself to at least learn about what's involved and then decide whether or not you want to do it. And so by educating yourself and aligning yourself with people who are, who already are where you want to be and getting information from those resources, and then you could decide if you want to do this and how to do it. So that to me is, you don't want to be sitting here 10 years from now and say, shoot, I should have, I really should have taken advantage and I'd start looking at business then, because life creeps up and more expenses or whatever the case may be, and you get into different habits. So when you're thinking about it, just, satisfy your urge. My late partner always used to say he had an entrepreneurial itch that he wanted to scratch. And it's sort of in keeping with that. Find out what's involved and at least start down the path and then decide. And I think people will be pleasantly surprised at how doable this is.